Hello and Happy New Year, and welcome back to the Design Hub Season 2. Today we're joined by our first guest of the year, Rob Bennett. Thank you for joining us today, Rob. How are you?
I'm very well, Molly. Thank you for asking. I'm curious to see where this conversation will take us today. We'll see how we go, because I think we're going to cover a lot of ground.
Hopefully. So to kick things off, could you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got into this industry?
My name's Rob Bennett. I do lots of different things, and I think the aspect of doing lots of different things should be a reminder to everybody. When you have a varied career, you have that because of accidents. So someone will ask you to do a thing or something left field or some kind of conversation. People think they curate their own career, and by and large, in my experience, that's kind of nonsense. Because if you want a broad experience, then you need to say yes to stuff, even if you're not confident about what it is that they're asking you to do. Learn your skills. So I've done lots of things, and therefore now the kind of stuff that I do with two bits of main themes of work, which is health and safety training and consultancy. So I do training courses and audits and stuff to do with health and safety. But the main stuff that I do is STEM engagement. So I do a lot of workshops with lots of different organizations trying to inspire and engage young people, essentially to change the world. But that's really what I do. And it's, to call it work, I kind of pinch myself a bit because it is just an absolute joy. It really is an absolute joy. But yeah, so I would say, yep, I'm a facilitator. I'm a STEM inspirer, engager, and I'm also a learner as well. So I'm learning for those who I'm trying to encourage them to learn, if you know what I mean. So we're learning together. But I think that curious mind within engineering is absolutely critical, and particularly where you've got people that see the world in a different way. So I really do try and encourage people to be themselves, and that makes a huge difference as to being confident in their own journey, I guess.
And you just mentioned that you're always learning and you're always curious. Where did this kind of passion stem from?
That's a great question. Obviously, it happened a long time ago, because being 60 means I've been around a bit. But it really did, a massive part of that experience for me as a child, growing up in Cornwall, which, as you know, is attached to England. Out in the woods, out on the water. My father had fought in the war, in the Navy. And he constantly asked me questions, constantly saying, yeah, but why? Yeah. So he was asking me those questions, which encouraged me to do the same, and never to kind of take anything for granted. So it was that, even the curiosity of, why does the tide come in and go out? Because of boats. And why are boats the shape that they are? And why do they make them the way that they make them? And why is a tree such a phenomenal environment and habitat for multiple life forms? And how do trees work? So all of that as a child, and having the freedom to do it in an age, and you're too young to know this, but in an age where there was no social media, no interweb, no laptops, no personal computers, there was freedom. Freedom of thought, freedom of expression of thought, freedom of questioning. And if I wanted to know an answer to a thing I couldn't discover myself, I'd have to go to one of those places called a library. You may have heard of them.
I think I have heard of those.
They're amazing, and they were full of books. So you have to go to a thing called the Encyclopedia Britannica, and it had loads of stuff in it, and some really cool pictures and lots of good knowledge. And you'd have to be properly curious, because you'd have to know what the question was to know where to look for the answer. And we'll talk about that a bit more later, but it's really different to the world that you live in today, where you can get an answer instantly. My challenge would be, yeah, but actually, is that the right answer?
Wonderful. And you said that you've lived a long life, and looking back, would you say that there are any key moments or people who helped you believe in yourself and pushed you to forge your own path while learning all the same?
Yeah, I mean that's probably more than one question, really, isn't it? I mean, there's things in terms of what inspired me as a child when I wasn't out doing stuff and then going home when I was hungry. Um, there were some significant things, and I have to blame David Attenborough for this, because David Attenborough at the time became controller of BBC Two. And as a result of that, in the 70s, he then introduced much more science programming, much more natural history programming,
Mm,
which was the kind of stuff that I was interested in. So when I wasn't out doing it, I was fascinated by looking at programs like Horizon, Tomorrow's World, and particularly someone who still hugely influences me, the way that I communicate and my thinking about communication, is James Burke. Now, James Burke is still around. He did the kind of narration and commentary on the Apollo program. He was part of the Tomorrow's World team. And for the biggest thing for me, he made a series of programs called Connections. You can still get them on YouTube. And it's the connection between a modern thing in the modern world and an ancient thing,
mhm.
and the various connections between that old thing and the new thing, and what happened in between. So what people were working on, what they were thinking about, how that technology shaped and changed things. And that to me is we should be looking at history, because history is STEM. So when you're looking at the future, you have to look back and try and, okay, well, let's not try and make the same mistakes again, but also as well that curiosity of looking and learning from the past. And can we glean and understand what was going on then to help us with what's going on now? And I see that connection all the time, even if we're talking about AI,
Mm.
that process of, okay, has there been things like this in the past? And as you can imagine, yeah, there has. Um, but how do we learn from those experiences so that we can use that skill in our toolbox today? In terms of fueling my fire, I would say that kind of curiosity and questioning of the past and how things are made. Um, but interestingly enough, school wasn't that place for me. So as an autistic young person, where before autistic was invented, if you know what I mean, there
Yeah.
wasn't any formal diagnosis of autism when I was young. So I loved learning, but I wasn't very good at learning temporary facts to pass exams. So I didn't leave school with very many qualifications. But much of my learning I couldn't wait to get on with when I left the door of school behind me, if that makes sense.
I understand what you mean. So if school wasn't necessarily something that worked for you when you were younger, how did you create the life where and in the field you are now, from leaving school to where you are now, teaching people about STEM, running a health and safety consultancy? What did that kind of pathway look like?
It was a very wiggly line, and when I do career talks, I show a photograph of a very windy road going through hills and rivers and stuff, and very windy pathways. I didn't plan a career. The only thing I wanted to do when I left school was be in a band in the 80s. So that's what I did. Now you think, what's that got to do with STEM? Everything, everything. And it's also got to do with transferable skills and learning. So you've got to learn stuff, you've got to learn songs. You know, if you're going to do a set on a stage, you're singing, you've got to learn, you've got to know inside and out, maybe 15 or 20 songs.
Mm.
You're not going to be able to look at music or words. You've got to know it. It's got to be in you. It's got to be part of you. Harmonies and stuff. I've been singing since I was 5, doing
Wow.
performances, public performances. From that age, I was in 2 or 3 theatre productions growing up. Joseph in Joseph and Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. I was Joseph. 10. So having to learn all of that. So the theatrical and music, people now see that there's connections with that and say programming and computing because of patterns and numbers and stuff. So I'm going from that, recording, discipline of recording is massive. In the old days when it was recorded on tape, can you believe that? So if there was digital analog tape, they were just getting into that then. So that was an emerging new technology, but the discipline of having to sing exactly the same meter, words, tone, volume when you're double tracking or triple tracking is really, really hard discipline. And you had to do it over and over and over and over again. So that's a kind of very minutiae of learning that you think you can analyze things and take them apart and then put them back together again, which I loved doing physically when I was young. I then went and got a job at Boots, Boots the chemist, because I needed to do a normal job and subsidize stuff in terms of music. And I did every job at Boots, from working in the warehouse and learning about volumetrics and booking in systems and electronic ordering mechanisms within the retail sector. And I left Boots some 10 years later as an area trainer, having done every job in between. So I learned a lot, constantly learning. When MVQs were, which you won't even know what an MVQ is, so national vocational qualifications. So we call them different things now, but in the early 90s, MVQs were sort of trailblazing stuff that government was trying to push. So lots of portfolios of evidence, etc. Similar things now with BTECs and T levels, but within industry. So you were employed and you were doing those jobs. So I was looking after about 300, 350 employees who were doing MVQ levels 1, 2, and 3. So that would be kind of apprenticeships, level 2, level 3, level 4, that kind of stuff in terms of content. And then I ended up as an area trainer, but that role didn't suit me. I then went and worked for Halfords as a manager, running a parts department, supplying a garage. I knew nothing about car parts, so I had to learn very quickly. The area manager didn't see me for 6 months because I'd probably ripped his head off because I had no idea what I was doing, but he knew I knew how to learn. And I think that's a huge thing, is learning how to learn. Then you know what your skills are, and then you go, I just need to apply them in a different way. So it's a different widget, but it's still a widget. It still takes up space. I still got to know how to communicate. I still got to know where it fits, how it works. I need to go and talk to the technicians in the garage and go, what on earth is that? You know, I was going to say, how do you fit a flux capacitor to a DeLorean, but I don't think they were doing that then.
I don't know. If they could get the car up to 88 miles an hour, we
Well,
might be
I
able
know,
to go see
I know.
Marty McFly.
And I'm looking forward to that. I really am. So I did that, and then I did that for quite some time. So I was a manager at Halfords, and then someone came and said, "Do you want to come and work for Arco?" And I go, "I've never heard of Arco." Yeah, we need a manager. Okay, all right. So I took up the role, and that's kind of business to business as well, mainly, and some sort of general public customers, but mainly it's business to business. Ended up as an area manager for a safety company. So I got NEBOSH qualified in a safety company. So knowing how to do the stuff as well as the theory and the practical, and dealing a lot with different sectors within industry, which was eye-opening, and lots of learning about that. But the whole thing just became too much for me, and I ended up having a nervous breakdown. And you go, that's awful. Yeah, it was awful, but it was almost the best thing that happened to me, on the basis that I couldn't see how I could do something different. I would just carry on doing what I was doing and getting more and more stressed, more and more pressurized. And maybe for some watching this might be, one of those moments where they think, okay, yeah, I'm in that. Well, there's a way out of that. For me, it was kind of imposed on me, and I ended up losing the job. And then I realized that people were loyal to me and not the company. And so other people helped and supported in terms of just giving me opportunities. And as a result of those opportunities, I then end up someone saying, don't just look after the first aid stuff, because I ended up doing that first aid audits.
Mm.
Can you do the rest of it? I said, what do you mean, John? He said, well, I fix trucks, I don't do health and safety. Okay, so it was then going, okay, well, I can do policy documents, risk assessments, and training, because I've been a trainer. And it's just applying different skills in different ways. And so I did that. One of the companies that businesses that Arco sponsored was the Bloodhound Land Speed Record Project. But they were
Okay.
based, the head office was in Hull. I was in Bristol, which is where they were building the car. And so I ended up local sponsor liaison and sorted out loads of different things to help and support them. And I loved what they were doing and kept in contact with them when I left Arco. And one day, one of them said to me, Rob, can we have a chat? I said, yeah, not a problem. What is it, Sarah? She said, I've just been on a health and safety course and I realized we haven't got any. I said, what do you mean? You're building a car to go 1,000 miles an hour and you haven't got any health and safety? Nope. Can you help? I go, well, yeah, sure, I don't mind. So I get introduced to Richard Noble, who, land speed record holder in his own right, Thrust SSC project, first supersonic car. And Sarah introduces me to Richard as, Richard, this is Rob. He's going to stop you going to prison. And I successfully managed to do that.
That's good
so
to
then
hear.
it is, isn't it? So sorting out all the basics, so the UK compliance stuff, and also providing the training, like manual handling training, abrasive wheel training, fire marshal training, first aid, all those kinds of different things. I could provide all of that. And I was at the technical center. So I was then, wow, I love their airfix kit, or I could, let me go and have a look, let me go and see what they're doing, and I could get right up close and personal to the engineering. And then I got drawn into education because they needed some people to do stuff. I was there and I was asked, do you want to come and help? And I said, yeah, I'd love to, because I was doing personal and social education lessons in prisons, youth custody centers, and young offenders institutions and secondary schools when I was in the band.
Wow.
So it was just singing a different song, telling a different story. But I knew how to tell a story. I knew how to sing, So I had to learn stuff, as it was technical. I had to understand what is computational fluid dynamics and how do I explain that to 6-year-olds, or what on earth is the description of the rubber that is used as the fuel grain in a hybrid rocket. Which, do you want to know what it is? Or?
Go on, tell me.
Hydroxyl terminated polybutadiene, if anyone ever asks. Essentially, it's
I'll make a
rubber.
note.
Rubber.
Okay.
So understanding about that, HTP, high test peroxide, how does it work? Bit of chemistry, and all the stuff to do with the engineering and the beautiful EJ200 jet engine gas turbine that's in the Eurofighter is the power horse to get Bloodhound going. So I was learning all about that, and I'm working and gleaning and learning from aviation aeronautical engineers and also Formula One engineers and technicians. And that was phenomenal. What a fantastic place to learn. So it was like the Encyclopedia Britannica on steroids. And I was then doing tours around the car, and people were asking me questions that I needed to find out information, everything from, the wheels, the rivets, the pop rivets, what's the bonding agent that they use, how do they make the upper chassis, what materials are used in the car, everything and anything. I needed to glean and understand so I could tell that story. And I'm still involved with Bloodhound education now, and that's sort of 12, 13 years later.
Wow.
And it also became a stepping stone for other conversations with other organizations like Coventry Transport Museum, where I directly consult with them now, and design and develop workshops, mainly home educators, which is wonderful. So there's some funding there to be able to do that. And then started to engage with with others. So how I got involved then with the Royal Academy of Engineering workshops, and running workshops at Make UK, which is one of the apprentice hubs for UK manufacturing in Birmingham. So I do different things, otherwise I get very
Mm.
bored. So it's can you see it's kind of a very weavy story?
I can see where the line wiggling comes from.
Yeah, it's not like, at 6 I decided to be engineer, and then studied mechanical engineering at Southampton University, and now I work for Rolls-Royce or Jaguar Land Rover. It's a bit more wiggly. Yeah.
So you mentioned doing STEM workshops and a little bit about the activities and the things that you deliver. Um, what excites you most about working with children and young people, getting them involved in this kind of world, involved in STEM?
What every day excites me with engaging with young people particularly is one of the things I describe myself as a facilitator of learning.
Okay.
What many young people are used to is, you may have heard of them, is what's called a teacher. Have you heard of that? So a teacher historically would be like the fount of all knowledge, and they would dish out the knowledge, and you'd have to learn it, whatever that
Mm,
knowledge was, in order for you to pass an exam. I mean, what a ridiculous system that is. So there's no real exploration of learning. There's no genuine curiosity. There's no, let's go down a line of questioning as far as you want to go. We can go down as many rabbit holes as you want to get to the nth degree of trying to understand whatever it is. Or, here's a challenge. I'm going to give you some stuff and give you a challenge and give you no instructions.
mm,
And I want to see what you're going to do with it. And I will not tell you any answers if you ask me a question. I'll just give you a better question because I know you know the answer. You just need to get there. So what
yeah.
thrills and excites me are those questions. So every time I ever do a workshop, I always say, you can ask me a question about anything. Now, sadly, in the school setting, most of the time they don't ask me.
Mm,
They're not conditioned, or encouraged or confident enough to ask any question about anything. I do volunteer information because many of them don't know that adults can be autistic, and they've never met an autistic adult. It's not actually true, they have, but and I've met teachers afterwards going, I'd be too afraid to tell the kids. But then the shoulders go down, they feel more
yeah.
confident, and I talk about most engineers I've ever met are autistic. One way, shape, or form, they're neurodiverse because they see the world in a different way, which is what we need. We
Yeah.
need people to see the world in a different way to come up with better solutions. So young people can come up with phenomenal things. I'll give you one example. Last summer, I was doing a workshop at Coventry Transport Museum. Very simple, and I'm sure you've done this, Molly, is the experiment where we're looking at making electricity, by using fruit. So we're talking about, electrolytes and how we have electrolytes in us, and we get that kind of electrical energy from minerals and eating and drinking stuff, not those horrible fluorescent drinks, but proper food. Yeah.
Mm.
So there's a little bit of background, and then I say, okay, here's some leads with crocodile clips. Here's an LED, and we talk about what an LED is as well. And here's some fruit and veg. Off you go. Make some circuits. Very simple instruction. Off they go. So you got them all making little circuits, and the lights glow, and they use different fruit and different veg and so on, and multiply them, and they can see create more energy because it's creating more chemical reactions with the copper and the zinc.
Yeah.
So one young lad, this young lad decides, I'm watching him. I'm not going anywhere near him. I'm just watching him. And he decides to take this potato and do this crazy thing by cutting the potato in half. So we've got zinc on one half of the potato and copper on the other side of the potato, separating the potato by cutting it in half and then putting it back together again. And suddenly he realizes he's created a switch.
Ooh.
And then that's not the end of it. Then he decides, okay, so in his brain, we've already talked about we have electrolytes in us. So we generate electricity. So then he goes, I wonder if I can create a switch with me and my brother. So he gets his brother to hold one bit of the potato, he holds the other bit of potato, and then they join hands and let go. And lo and behold, the light goes on and off. And then he said, let's see how big a circuit we can make out of people. And I'm involved in this big circle, and there's 10 of us. And we've turned all the lights off, and we're making this light flash on and on. And it just struck me of just give kids opportunity for learning. And sometimes they'll come up with things you haven't planned. Good.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they'll come up with a way of thinking that you know that these are the kind of young people that would be brilliant in problem solving engineering opportunities. I did stuff around sustainability in the autumn, and again, somebody brought in a worksheet, just a brown sheet of paper with lots of different pictures on, looking at sustainability for vehicles, and decided that the best way of making vehicles sustainable was making them biodegradable. So instead of them
Okay.
lasting forever, they would last a
Mm.
period of time and then you'd have to replace it because it would just literally biodegrade. So using photoluminescent algae for lighting,
Wow.
using building cars out of either bamboo or bone. It was just
Interesting.
amazing. And there was all kinds of stuff around kinetics because we talked about kinetic energy, and then we
Mm.
talk about can you make energy, can you make fuel from water? Can cars run on water? And all of these things. And it fueled this idea of doing things in a completely different way.
Mm.
And that is what I love. So I can run the same workshop twice in the same day and have someone with me going, the morning session was totally different from the afternoon. I said, yes, of course it will be, because the dynamic of the young people in the room change the workshop. And that's what thrills me. So I can develop something and they'll take it in a different direction. And I love that because it's about hoping that they'll leave with more questions than they came
Mm.
in the room with,
Yeah,
not less. Going, off you go and do some more exploring. I've
I
lit
like
their
that.
fire and off they go.
You mentioned previously that a lot of kids were not necessarily very confident about asking questions, or they weren't necessarily at first willing to engage and speak to you about stuff like that. What would you say you've seen as the biggest barrier when it comes to kids getting into STEM and exploring that kind of world?
As we just highlighted, I see much higher percentage, and it is statistically proven, much higher percentage of neurodiversity within engineering particularly. So STEM generally, but engineering particularly.
Mm.
But it's also exclusive. One of the critical things of everything that I do is creating inclusive learning environments. Now, I can do that. I can do that when I've got my own space and an environment where I'm setting everything up. And I can also attempt to do that in a school, but that's more difficult because
Mm.
of all of the barriers and all of the junk and the baggage that they've come into the room with. To try
Yeah.
and create an inclusive space is really quite hard, but it's crucial for learning. So one of the things that you can do with time is for young people that need their own time to kind of get there. So they start very quiet, very insular, and then over time then come out of themselves, and then they, because they feel comfortable, they feel safe, they feel secure. And these are the things that need to happen to make everybody feel that they're involved and welcome in the room.
Mm.
I have to say, Molly, that sadly that I see in school environments, young people don't feel welcome. Their difference is accepted, it's bullied,
Mm.
which is similar to my experience at school in some ways. So it hinders their learning. And therefore the outcome of that going, I want to do this, I want to do that, never even gets there because it's stifled, it's dumbed down. And because success is seen as passing temporary facts to pass an exam, if they're not good at that, they're seen as failing.
Mm.
Whereas in reality is they just don't talk Swahili and all that's happening in school is in Swahili.
Yeah, I understand that. My experience, I was never good at with exams. But I've recently just done my apprenticeship exams, and two-thirds of that I was able to talk. I was giving
Yes.
presentations, I was talking through my knowledge as opposed to writing it down, having to check my grammar, making sure that the equation was good. And I found it a lot more comfortable in comparison to the rest of the exams
Yeah.
and the way they've been formatted.
Yeah.
And I think it was just better fit for me. And I understand that for a lot of kids, fitting differently is not going to fit the same for everyone else.
No, it isn't. And it's the way things are framed. We in schools, we do this ridiculous thing of teaching things in subjects, but life
Mm.
isn't subjects. So maths isn't a subject. It's not an abstract concept because there's no such thing as a one. Well, it is an abstract concept. There's no such thing as a one. What you have to give it a context. It's used to
Yeah,
describe things. So it's either, trying to explain something or trying to solve a problem. So it's actually a language that we
yeah,
use to describe and solve problems, but we don't talk about it that way. So if you have a reason for the maths, oh, now I get why I need the maths, as opposed to do 16 pages of matrices. Well, what's that for? Because I've just told you you need to, and it's in the exam.
yeah. And how would you are there any suggestions you could make to parents, teachers, any organizers, to sort of bring kids out into the show and develop their curiosity?
Absolutely. There are multiple ways, and I see it and talk to young people a lot about work experience,
Mm,
because the way things are framed in school, even the language we use isn't helpful. So we talk about things called soft skills. Well, soft skills aren't soft, they're foundational,
yeah,
absolutely foundational. They're your transferable skills that in 20 or 30 years' time are still going to be important and relevant. Some of the knowledge will be out of date,
mm,
totally irrelevant. It won't be important anymore. But your skills that are transferable will absolutely be essential. So in that regard, schools could do much more project-based learning. And if they are home educating, they're essentially doing project-based learning. That is what they're doing. So you're weaving in history, geography, geology, music, maths, English, all into projects. And they're coming out with outcomes, whether it's being videoed or they've made a thing. And it's something they can talk about at assessments or interviews or part of their apprenticeship. And they've got a little bit more about them because they've done something. I mean, the amount
yeah,
of young people I meet in schools going, and I ask them, what do you do for a living? Which is, my stock question for a 10-year-old. And they go, well, I don't know what you mean. What do you do when you're not in school? Oh, I just chill with my mates, or I'm listening to music. And it's like, what do you mean you're not doing anything? So I
mm,
constantly encouraging young people, either in school or out of school, uh, the things to them would be, firstly, if anyone says here's an opportunity, or here's a trip, or here's a thing to do, always say yes, even if you don't know whether you're going to like it. You'll then know you don't like it, but at least have a go. Get
yeah,
involved in extracurricular stuff, and I don't necessarily mean sport, because people talk about leadership or teams, but it's only within the context of sport. Well, that's not actually what we mean. And most young people don't know how to do presentations because they're never asked to do them.
yeah,
So how are you going to learn that skill? Whereas in the real world, it's an essential skill. Because if you can't get your ideas across, you will either not get the job or the apprenticeship or that research and development budget or whatever it happens to be, because you don't know how to get your ideas across or win an argument. So
mm,
that even that, so I say, well, do voluntary work. What? Do stuff that you don't get paid for? Yes, because you'll get stuff in your toolkit that will pay dividends in the future. You pay loads because you're learning skills. So do voluntary work, do go and get involved in a youth organization. And I've known kids that have done it as a result of a conversation I've had, which has been amazing. Parents have come back and said no, they've gone and done it. So army cadets or air cadets or stuff like that, or whatever it is, do Duke of Edinburgh if you want to do that, but do something. And then I meet some other young people and they don't realize they've already got these skills. And this is a group of young people, and it's larger than you would think, who are carers,
Okay.
either for siblings or for parents. And they're already exhibiting those transferable employability skills, but nobody taught to them in that way to know that they're already building those skills, but they already are. And I've had
Yeah.
that conversation in a careers day. Well, I've got no time to do that stuff, and I'm about to lay into them. And then they go, because I'm a carer for my mum. And I went, you're doing all that now. You have to manage your time and resources, communicate effectively at different levels with different people. Oh, and you managed to get to school.
Yeah.
But they don't realize they have those employability skills or would know how to talk about them at an interview and see that they were relevant.
Okay. And is there a piece of advice you might give to a young person who doesn't necessarily feel like they fit in, and feel a bit different? Like how do you think that they could develop these soft skills if they don't necessarily feel like they fit in anywhere else?
Um, there's words like geeky and nerdy and stuff like that, and
I
they're
don't
used, yeah, and they're almost used in derogatory terms. But I would say if you're that kind of kid, then go and find some other kids that are like you. Because if there'll need to be some kind of catalyst, some kind of facilitator, some kind of grown up that will help to steer that, because
Mm,
there's lots and lots of positive for doing that. So if you like, code breaking, there's loads of things that you can do with that, programming, and different challenges and competitions and all sorts of things that you can do if you like that sort of stuff. And the other part is sometimes the thing of, if you're a little bit older, of why don't you send an email to a company that you're interested in and see if they'll even let you go and have a walk around, see what they do, or go and make the tea, or go and sweep the floor, go and learn, because
mm,
at the end of the day you want to be employed, and you need to kind of get your head around what you like doing. Well, I like gaming. Okay, what bit of gaming do you like? What, just playing the game, or problem solving, or actually doing the programming? And
yeah.
there's massive jobs around programming and coding. I mean, you can go and do a job at GCHQ, MI5, or MI6 if you want to, and
Wow.
they need geeky, nerdy people who see patterns, etc. That some see as, oh, well, you don't fit. Good, I'm glad I don't fit, because that means there's a uniqueness that I'm confident in. And what young people, and I wouldn't have been as a teenager, they're not confident in their uniqueness. But
Mm,
being them is a lot less effort and energy than trying to be what other people want you to be, which is a kind
yeah.
of social media question, which again I talk about. It's the elephant in the room. Going, you've got mates on there, you've got friends on there, but you don't even know what they look like. They pass them in the street, they don't look like that, because they're trying
Mm,
to pretend to be something else. Don't try and pretend to be them, just be you.
I like that. And for you personally, what's next, and how can people find you and get in contact?
Uh, what's next? There's a bit of, if you'd have said to me in 2024, what you're going to be doing in 2025, I'll be going, well, I know a bit, and there'll be quite a lot I don't. And I'm glad about that. So there'll be stuff that comes along, and I'll just say yes, and then I'll end up doing it. Like making resources for an alpaca farm. Well, I don't know anything about alpacas, but I know how to make education resources. And literally starting conversations at the moment, which happened during last year, and I never saw it, but other people see things. Whereas, so I'm starting conversation about supporting and coaching somebody, so
Okay.
mentoring, um, because I kind of see they might have a complicated business, but then I can take that complicated thing and make it into something simple, which is easier for people to understand, particularly normal people. So you've got very specialist people that talk very
Um,
specialist.
where do you see yourself going next, and how can people find you?
So I'm always excited by the fact that I don't know. So at 60, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And I don't mind that. I've got projects potentially that are going to happen this year, one of which working with and this goes how it goes. So I have a conversation with someone a year ago, and they want to do some work. They want me to do some work for them, and I go, that's fine. Can you do it in the next 3 months? No, I'm booked. I'll let you know then if we get any funding, because we've got some home educator stuff we'd like to do. And then silence, nothing. And then I get an email out the blue from someone else that I know, from who's a museum consultant, who has used one of the projects that I've been involved with at Coventry Transport Museum to showcase what's possible in terms of engagement and outreach in museums. And I went and spoke last year at the Museum and Heritage Show in Olympia in London. And they got in contact with me and essentially said, are you up for this? You've been personally recommended.
Oh,
So you
wow.
never know how these conversations go or where they're going to lead. So I have conversations all the time. And I know that there are people out there, which I find staggering, that are working out how they can incorporate what I can help them with into what they do, just because I see things the way I see them. So that would be great. So that would be looking at developing a workshop content for a new exhibit to do with the Marines at the
Oh, wow.
Maritime Museum in Portsmouth, the Royal Navy Museum down there, and developing some content for home educators. So that's kind of my happy space anyway. So I'm looking forward to that. Potential stuff around developing effective presentations for communicating content for a apprenticeship in not software engineering, but AI engineering.
Wow.
So it's like a subdivision of software engineers as we develop AI technologies, and development of courses that are accredited for studying AI. But as you can imagine, there's an awful lot of gobbledygook. And what I'm very good at is taking gobbledygook and making it into normal language that normal people understand. So I'm having a call around that, and potentially that will develop into other things, and we'll just see where it goes. So I just don't know in some respects, and I'm glad I don't. But I've got enough of the interesting things that I'm doing anyway, bookings through till September. So if anybody wants to book me for anything, September and October is not looking too bad if you want to book me for stuff. But yeah, plan me in. But I have this conversation all the time, which is I'm not McDonald's. So if you
Okay.
go to McDonald's, I don't know, I don't go to McDonald's, but if you go to McDonald's, they have, like, I still imagine they do have an illuminated thing above the counter with their menu on it. And if it's on the menu, you can have it, right? But you can't go into McDonald's and say, can I have a falafel wrap with hummus? Because they don't do falafel wraps with hummus in McDonald's. But if you came to my counter and you said that's what you want, I'll go, not a problem, because I'm a chef. So you say
That's a
what
good
you
way.
want, and I'll go away and work out how to do it. I'm still waiting for someone to ask me to do workshops around washing machines, because I think that would be so cool, because of the technology involved and the forces involved. And why doesn't the washing machine not only shake itself apart, but your kitchen apart? Is such a brilliant way of talking about the brilliance that is so complicated, and yet people take for granted, even in their own homes, of the work that engineers do every single day, every
Yeah.
single day. And we just take all those things for granted. Even like the coatings on electrical circuits within your mobile phone. If someone doesn't do that right, your phone doesn't work.
Yeah.
There's so much to learn.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope
Thank
you've
you for
enjoyed
asking
it.
me. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, and it's it helps to clarify in your own mind what you've done when someone asks you questions about it, just to get it across. So hopefully it's an encouragement to others as well. We'll see, and I'd love to hear any comments as well, and other people's journeys. And of course, I'm always looking for opportunity to collaborate with people. I'm not bothered about myself. I like working with others and making them look good. So I'm really happy when those opportunities come up as well.
Amazing. So if you enjoyed this episode, you can follow us, you can like, subscribe, make sure to follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook as well. And until next time, bye.